I'm lactose tolerant. 10,000 years ago, from 8,000 BC to 3,500 BC, people migrated from Africa to the Fertile Crescent because of cold weather and a lack of a food supply. Around 3,500 BC, cities started growing across Mesopotamia because hunter-gatherers transformed into farmers, and people used irrigation systems to farm. This was also around the time horses became domesticated and people started traveling in the Middle East and Asia, and people became nomadic. In 3200, the cities were divided into two parts because of different dialects. In 2350 BC, the Akkadians came and united the Sumerian city-states under one ruler. In 1792 BC, Mesopotamia, Babylon became the most powerful city, and they ruled a lot of the Middle East because King Hammurabi took throne. In 1195 BC, the Assyrians took over because they were warriors and knew how to fight, and they grew their city-state into an empire. So now they're from Africa to the Fertile Crescent. They're starting to go into the Middle East and Europe. My ancestors went into Europe. In 612, Babylonia once again rose to power as the ruler of Mesopotamia because the Assyrians couldn't protect their borders and were weak. In 529, the Persians conquered Babylon. In 323 BC, the Roman troops conquered the last territories after Alexander the Great died, and they stayed in the hands of the Republic until 27 BC, and people also started traveling along the Silk Road. From 27 BC to 476 AD, the Roman Empire ruled areas in Europe, Africa, and Asia, and they were Catholic, and my ancestors were most likely part of the Roman Empire. In 500 AD, it was taken over by the German tribal Rugians, and they took over Italy after deposing the last emperor in 476, and my ancestors traveled from Europe to Italy. In 493 AD, the Ostrogoths set up a kingdom, and in 535 BC AD, the Eastern Roman ordered focus to bring back Italy under imperial control. This was from 535 to 750, and from 750 to 979 AD, most of Italy was conquered by the Frankish king of Charlemagne, and he founded the Holy Roman Empire. And my ancestors were still in Italy. In 979 to 1215 AD, trade and industry was very vigorous, and they developed trade contacts across Europe. In 1215 to 1453 AD, the economy of the northern and central Italy expanded, but the Black Death killed a lot of people, but not my ancestors. From 1453 to 1648, there was a rivalry between the Italian states, which drew neighboring powerful states, and Italy actually lost their independence to the Spanish. From 1648 to 1789 AD, Austria rose to power and gained parts of Italy. From 1789 to 1837 AD, all of Italy except Sicily fell under French rule because of revolutionary wars and Napoleonic wars. From 1871 to 1914, Italy was since unified after the wars. And from 1914 to 1960, World War I and World War II occurred, and during which my grandparents immigrated over to America because they didn't like Mussolini and they wanted the American dream, which was around 1936. So in 1936, they came to Delaware, and they stayed there and raised my dad. And once my dad finished college in Delaware, he moved to Atlanta, and then he got a job transfer to Texas, and then he moved back to Atlanta, and I was born, and then I was still in Alpharetta. So that's how I became lactose tolerant. So I went from Africa to the Fertile Crescent, to Europe, to Italy, to Delaware, to Texas, to Atlanta, and then I was born. So it's basically why I'm tolerant.
At the beginning of the agricultural revolutions 10,000 years ago, the people of Northern Europe were slowly converting from hunter-gatherers to food producers. As Europe began agriculture, cows without humps that had been domesticated in Mesopotamia started migrating towards Northern Europe. These cows were used for numerous tasks, such as grain production, fertilization, and creation of dairy products. Humans were initially lactose intolerant, but because of the use of cows for milk, cheese, and other dairy products, the mutation of lactose tolerance spread throughout Europe along with the spread of cow domestication. As agriculture and domestication occurred in 3500 BC, settlements began to form. Once these settlements became stable and increased in population, they combined with other settlements and created civilizations throughout Europe. One of these civilizations was the Celts. The Celts emerged about 1100 BC. They gained influence by the creation of city-states during the Iron Age. While there were the Celts, there were also German tribes in northern Europe that attacked the Romans. The Romans put much effort into protecting themselves from the Germans in 200 AD. In 500 AD, the Celts were still in Europe, and the German tribes were successful in attacking the Romans, therefore gaining land to make a few of their own civilizations. In 1000 AD, the Franks took over most of Germany. When exploration started in the 1400s, the Germans were still part of France, and therefore some Germans migrated to the French land in the Americas. With this introduction of the European society in the Americas, the Columbian Exchange came along. The Columbian Exchange brought cattle to the Americas. Since most Europeans had gained lactose tolerance by this point in time, the Europeans that came over to settle in the Americas could have farms and produce and eat dairy products. For the next 600 years, lactose tolerance prevailed in the Americas, and the Europeans that came to America from Europe, where dairy products were still extensive. Since I am of German and Irish descent, I have gained the ability to digest lactose through my heritage.
$10,000 years ago, all humans were lactose intolerant because of the lack of cattle and dairy available. Through the migration of Africa to Mesopotamia, nomadic lifestyles changed to agricultural societies, which led to the domestication of the cow, allowing people to adapt and to digest milk. As the years passed, two types of cattle migrated to regions including Europe, the Middle East, and Northern Africa, which were used for dairy production and contributed to animal domestication. With the establishment of the Roman Empire, people migrated to Europe and parts of Northern Africa, which allowed them to continue to drink milk, to adapt to the lactose digestion. The expansion of the Roman Empire led to the migration of people from Northern Africa to migrate to Western and South Africa. When the Roman Republic was formed, some of my ancestors remained in Rome, and others stayed in parts of West and South Africa. As the Republic began to collapse, those who lived in Rome migrated to England for a better way of living, and those who lived in Africa stayed there for many generations. Around the late 1800s, my ancestors from both England and Africa migrated to the Americas. My great-grandparents were raised and grew up in parts of Kentucky and Missouri until they moved to Chicago and California, where my parents grew up. They moved to Chicago, where I was born. Then we soon moved to Georgia. Since a significant amount of my ancestors were from England, I must have developed my ability to digest milk from my ancestors that lived in Europe, since lactose tolerance was a more dominant trait from European descent rather than from African descent.
Where did lactose tolerance first become prevalent in the world? This was a question posed by an AP Bio student. The answer is, it first became prevalent in the Fertile Crescent or Mesopotamia around 3500 BC.
One person from AP Biology asked, does lactose intolerance affect part of the culture of the country since it affects the types of foods a population can eat? Yes, a good example of this would be in China, whereas domestication of cattle did not occur widely in the Chinese area. Therefore, much of the Chinese food that is found today does not contain milk.
Another AP Biology student asks, does the economic condition of a country affect the presence of lactase persistence in its population? The answer would be no, unless the economic condition of a country didn't allow the presence of cattle.
Another question from an AP Biology student reads, did the amount of cattle in majority lactose-tolerant areas increase or decrease due to the demand for milk? The amount of cattle in lactose-tolerant areas would have increased because of the people being lactose tolerant, therefore being able to digest the milk. Because they were able to digest milk, the demand of it went up because it was a cheap source of a drink. So yes, the amount of cattle increased. An AP Bio student asked, how did pastoralism and lactose tolerance influence the structure of societies in early civilizations? Both the domestication of cattle and the growing of farms influenced civilizations by creating settlements around places where there was pastoralism and cow domestication, which eventually led to create empires and countries that we know today.